Thank you so much. And I'm thrilled to be here tonight. For the next hour or so, I'm going to go through financial aid, hopefully share some information with you, maybe that you didn't know, give you some tips and tricks on how to receive the maximum amount of financial aid possible. And if you have questions as we're going, please go ahead and throw them in the chat, and we'll make sure to get those answered either during the presentation or at the very end. And we'll just make sure we get through a lot of information here for you. So as Whitney said, I've been in financial aid now over 25 years. I've worked at 7 different schools, both large and small. I've got a lot of experience, and I say all that to say if you have a question that I don't know the answer, I'll research it. I'll make sure to get you an answer back. I do have a lot of experience with all the different schools, so hopefully I have most of the answers to the questions that you have tonight. We'll make sure to address all of those. So let me start by talking about what is financial aid. And financial aid is really there to help bridge the gap between what it costs to go to college and what a family can afford to pay for school. And what they can afford to pay is based on the federal formula. We'll talk about that in just a little bit. But most of that financial aid that we're going to talk about is need-based, meaning it is based on that financial aid form and the income and assets of a family. But there's a lot that is also based on academic talent or merit. So maybe like GPA, test scores like SAT, ACT, things like that. And we're going to go through all those different options as well in ways that you can maximize those opportunities. I do want to start with some misconceptions that are out there. I hear these every year. We have families that talk about this, so I just want to make sure we hit those up front. One of them is I'm going to wait until I receive my information from admission before I do my financial aid application. And this year, especially for those, you're all seniors, so this year especially, you probably have heard the FAFSA is delayed. Normally it opens in October, but now it's delayed until December at some point. Don't let this stop you from doing your admission stuff and your financial aid piece. So you may not hear from admission until later on, but as soon as that FAFSA opens up, go ahead and get the FAFSA in, get that financial aid application done. And that way, once you hear from admission, hopefully financial aid will follow very closely. So you don't have to do them sequentially. As soon as you can get your admission stuff done, get that done. And then as soon as the financial aid piece opens up, go ahead and get that done as well. The next one is I make too much money. We always get asked, what's that magic number? If I make X amount of dollars, should I even file the FAFSA? And my answer to that is if you have $1 million of income or assets, you can probably skip the FAFSA. Other than that, I'd encourage you to do it at least your first year. It depends on what school you apply to and what types of aid programs they have. So you want to make sure you've uncovered every rock. And I haven't met a family yet that doesn't want to maximize all their opportunities. So do the FAFSA at least your first year. And then if you don't qualify, don't do it your subsequent years. But if you might find out that you do, and then you can get some financial aid each and every year that your student's going to school. So don't skip out on it, especially that very first year. The FAFSA is intrusive or it takes too long. It does ask a lot of questions, but part of this delay is due to them trying to reduce some of those questions and make it a little bit easier for families. So we hope that the time to completion is a lot shorter. So hopefully that won't stop you from doing this. They do ask still a lot of questions and it may feel a little intrusive, but please don't let that stop you from receiving aid. There's lots of ways that you can receive that financial aid. And if you need help with that FAFSA, please reach out to counselors here, to the schools that you're interested in applying to. Those financial aid offices will help you. And worst case, if you can't reach those folks, you can always reach out to me. Having nothing to do with Rollins College, just let me know that you attended one of my high school nights and I'm happy to help you out with the FAFSA. Again, our goal is to help you receive financial aid wherever it is that you go to. And then finally, I should call the FAFSA people about my financial aid. And there's a 1-800 number when you fill out the FAFSA that they give you and say, call us with any questions. And they're well-meaning and I'm sure they're great people. But if you have questions about your financial aid, call the financial aid office that your student's interested in. They're going to be your best resource. They're going to know about all the different types of aid, how it impacts you, and the way it relates to your college application. If you need help with the user ID or the username and password, then yes, definitely call the FAFSA folks. They'll help you reset that or get that going. But anything about your financial aid, talk with that financial aid office that your student's interested in attending. All right, so let's get into the actual types of aid and different ways to receive financial aid. So they've fallen into these 4 different buckets. We have scholarships and grants, and we lump those together into what's called gift aid. That's free money. That's what we want to maximize. We want to receive as much of that as possible, reduce that cost for cost of school, because it's free money, you don't have to repay it. The other 2 are loans and employment, also referred to as work study. Those are lumped together as self-help aid. That means that you either have to repay it in terms of a loan, or you have to earn it in terms of employment or work study. And then what those different types of aid, these are the different sources that it comes from. So it comes from the federal government. So the U.S. Treasury provides lots of funding for need-based programs. The state of Florida also is a very large provider of financial aid, and we'll talk about each one of those programs here in just a minute. The largest one, though, is the institution, so the colleges themselves. Whatever college your student's interested in applying to, they're the ones that's going to have the largest resource of financial aid, whether it be scholarships or grants for your students. And then finally, private sources. So these might be referred to as outside scholarships or local organizations like the Kiwanis Club or Target or Walmart. Any of those organizations provide scholarships. And I'm going to give you some ideas and tips on how to receive those scholarships. So let's start there. Let's start with scholarships. So again, this is money that doesn't have to be repaid, free money that just reduces your cost. It's going to be awarded based on merit. Merit meaning GPA, the different types of courses that your student's in. Could be test scores like ACT or SAT score. Could be the essay that the student's written, things like that based on their merit. Could also be skill or unique characteristics like athletics, music, theater, art, things like that your student has, those types of talents or skills they could receive scholarships for. It's considered non-need based, meaning it doesn't matter the income. There's not going to be an income-based form that you have to file. It's all going to be strictly based on that student's merit or skill level. Now, specifically in terms of the types of scholarships, the biggest one or one of the largest ones is going to be the Florida Bright Futures program. Awesome program for our state of Florida residents. If your student stays here in Florida, goes to one of the schools in Florida, they can receive Bright Futures if they meet those criteria. For the academic scholars level, typically it's going to be based on their GPA, or core GPA, and then their test scores. Again, test scores meaning the SAT or ACT score. The student would need a 1340 on their SAT to receive that scholarship. If they have a 3.5 GPA, a 1340 SAT score, and they have 100 hours of community service, they can receive the Academic Scholars Award, which covers 100% of their tuition at a public university in the state of Florida. So a UCF, a USF, a Florida State, a University of Florida, any of those public colleges and universities, it would cover 100% of tuition. If they go to a private college in the state of Florida, it covers $212 a credit hour. And that works out to be about $6,700, $6,800 per year at that private college, like a Rollins or a Stetson, Tampa, Miami, all those different private colleges and universities here in the state of Florida. So a really strong scholarship that your students can receive. The next one is the Medallion Scholarship. It's also part of Bright Futures. It's just a different qualification. So in terms of SAT, the SAT requirement is a 1210. It's 75 hours of community service and a 3.0 GPA. If your student qualifies there for the Medallion Scholarship, it covers 75% of tuition at one of the public colleges or $159 per credit hour at one of the private colleges. This is one where both the Medallion and the Academic Scholars program, we tell families all the time, make sure your student takes both the ACT and SAT. Your students are going to do better on one or the other. We don't know which. I might do better on the SAT, you might do better on the ACT, or vice versa. But take both, and then if you're not quite at the Bright Futures level that you want to be at, if you didn't make the Medallion level, or you didn't make the Academic Scholars level, take the test that you scored the highest on. So if you did better on the SAT, take that one. And then the state of Florida will super score your test scores to help bring that score even higher. So your SAT, you don't know, is made up of a verbal score and a math score, and they'll take your highest test on each and create a whole new SAT score. So if your student took 10 of the SATs, which I'm sure they're not going to, but if your student did take 10 SATs, they would take the highest verbal across all 10, the highest math across all 10, and create that new super score. And that's what you could qualify then. You could reach that Academic Scholars level or the Medallion level. So this is one where you want to pay attention to those tests. If your student's not quite at that score, they could focus on one section. They could focus on the verbal or could focus on the math to try and bring that score up. They actually can take their SAT through up until August of next year. So for all of you that are seniors, sounds like you're all seniors, your students have until August next year to take the SAT and qualify for Bright Futures. Once they've started class in college next fall, though, that's it. Then they wouldn't qualify any longer. So this is one where you want to make sure they've done everything they can. because the higher their test score, it does equate to dollars for all 4 years that they could receive at that college or university. So that's the Bright Futures. The other state scholarship program is the Benequisto Scholarship Program. And this is a really cool program. So this is for students who did the PSAT back early on in their freshman year or younger. If they scored a certain level with College Board, they'll receive notification typically in December of their senior year that says you're a semifinalist for the National Merit Scholarship. If you receive that notice, then they go through another review, and in January or February, they whittle that semifinalist down to a finalist list. During January, February, and March, they're sending out letters saying you're a finalist, and here's the amount of scholarship that you're getting from National Merit Corporation. Typically, it's a $2,500 award from National Merit. If your student receives that letter from National Merit, contact the college that they're going to in the state of Florida. Because if they do, they can receive up to another $20,000 in the Benequisto Scholarship Program. This will help with room and board. It helps with other tuition costs. It can help with other expenses that you have. So that's why I say this is a really cool program. You can use that at any school, whether it's public or private. The key here is just watch for that letter in January and February. And if you get it from National Merit, get that to the financial aid office at the college or university that your student's interested in. It has to be in the state of Florida, though. You have to be attending Florida. A school here in Florida. So those are the state scholarship programs, and there's institutional. So again, these are going to be the largest sources of financial aid for your students. So the colleges themselves offer a lot of merit-based awards. Some merit-based awards are what they call test optional. Some schools are saying you don't have to submit your SAT or ACT to be considered for their scholarships. Others say they do. So just find out from the schools that you're interested in what their requirements are. Check to see if they have a priority scholarship date or even a deadline for scholarships. Your student might be a 4.0 student getting the highest test scores, but if they miss that date, they could miss out on significant scholarship dollars. So check with their website. All the information should be there. If you can't find it, just send an email or call their admission office. They'll be happy to provide that information to you. But those merit-based scholarships can range anywhere from a few $100s on up to full tuition, housing, and meals. It just depends on the school, depends on what they're offering. So check for them and see what they need. In general, most colleges, they don't need a separate application. They just need the admission application and the transcripts. However, there are some that do require additional applications for their scholarships. So just check with that financial aid office and admission office to see what they need. Again, they're typically on the website, easy to find. If you can't find it, shoot an email to them or give them a call and they'll let you know. Talent-based awards, these are going to be ones that you do have to take an extra step for. So if your student's interested in playing athletics at the college level, they need to reach out to the coach. If they have not talked with their coach already, do that very quickly, because most coaches are making offers years in advance to students. And once those dollars are gone, they're gone. So reach out to the school, reach out to the coaches. Usually the information's on their website. Make sure they know who you are and they've had a chance to take a look at you to see if you can receive any athletic money and be a participant on their team. The other one are performance-based scholarships. So these are, again, as examples, music, theater, or art. Typically, there's an audition that's required or a portfolio that's required. So just check with the colleges to see what those requirements are, when those happen, if they have multiple dates. A lot of times they want the student to be admitted first. So just find that out, what the steps are for that particular school. Again, look for deadlines and make sure that you meet those deadlines to get your face in front of those professors. And then the last one up here are the private sources. So again, these are outside scholarships, things that local organizations offer. The two websites I have up there, FastWeb and scholarships.com, are free scholarship search databases that you can use. You can enter your information. It'll kick out scholarships that your students can apply to. It's sort of like in travel, you might go to Travelocity or Kayak to try and find best prices. These are great sources to try and find scholarships. You still have to whittle through it to see what's really applicable to your student, but it gives you a great starting point to start looking for scholarships. It does take some time and effort to receive outside scholarships. I've worked at 7 different schools, and at every school I've worked at, what I found is a few students bring a lot of money. Not a lot of students bring a little bit. It's a few bring a lot because they put the extra time and effort into it to apply for those scholarships, write those essays, and again, apply for as many scholarships as possible. Story I always tell on my financial aid night, so I apologize if you've heard this before. But when I was back in the Midwest, I'm from the Midwest. I worked at schools back there. At one of the schools I'd worked at, I did a scholarship workshop for students. And a year after I did that, a student came back to me and said, I took your advice. I did the scholarship workshop. I did all the things that you said, and I applied to all these scholarships, and all I got was a $500 scholarship. So that's pretty good. That helps. Every little bit matters, reduces your cost. And that was about 20 years ago. So that $500 went a lot further at the time. But even today, that still helps with books. And he says, yeah, but I really put all this effort into it, and I spent a lot of time. That's all I got. And I knew the kid, so I knew he didn't put that kind of time into it. But I said, for fun, let's say you spent 10 hours on your applications. Not a math major, but if you spent 10 hours on your scholarship applications, earned a $500 scholarship, that's $50 an hour you just earned. What if you'd put 20 hours of work into it or 30 hours of work into it? Could you have gotten more? And the answer is possibly. It's not guaranteed. But what I've seen at every school that I've been at, and I've talked with the students, they've put a lot of time and effort into getting those scholarships. So it almost becomes a full-time job for a little bit of time in the spring of your senior year to get those scholarship applications. So right now is a great time to sign up for one of those scholarship search engines. And there's lots of them out there. My only caveat is if they ask for money, don't pay for it. There's tons of free ones that you can use. No one can guarantee a scholarship. So use one of the free ones. Put the time and effort into it now, setting up that profile. And there might be a few that are out there that you can start applying to, so you can put together a good essay, start to figure out what the applications look like for scholarships. Most of them will come available in January and February. That way you can get ahead of the game and be ready, and then just have to tweak those essays, and you're familiar with what applications look like. Almost all scholarships dry up by May 1st. So you've got sort of a short window there to get everything in. So again, get everything ready now so you're ready to go come January. All right, so those are scholarships. So now we'll pivot a little bit into grants. Grants are very similar to scholarships in that it's free money, doesn't have to be repaid. The main difference between the two is most grants, not all, but most are awarded based on financial need, which means there's an additional form that needs to be completed, which is the FAFSA. And we'll talk about the FAFSA specifically here in just a few minutes. So in terms of the different grants, again, the state of Florida offers some wonderful grants for our students. The very first one is one that is not need-based. You do not have to do the FAFSA for this one, but the Effective Access to Student Education, or EASE grant, is available to any student in the state of Florida whose parents are Florida residents, and a student attends a private college or university in the state of Florida. So a Rollins, a Stetson, a Miami, a Tampa, any of those private colleges, you just have to prove you're a Florida resident. You'll get, for this year, it's $3,500 for the year. You'll get that grant. And you get the grant every year as long as you maintain a 2.0 GPA. The next one up there, the Florida Student Assistance Grant, is a need-based grant. So you do have to file a FAFSA. Earlier, I talked about for scholarships to watch for scholarship deadlines. This is one where you'll want to look for need-based financial aid deadlines, or filing for financial aid with that college if they have a deadline or priority deadline. With the Florida Student Assistance Grant, the colleges get a flat amount of money from the state of Florida. Once they've spent those dollars, there's no more left. So if you apply late to that school, they may have already spent their dollars. So apply early, get your FAFSA in as quickly as you can. That way you can qualify for that Florida Student Assistance Grant if you're eligible for it. Right now, again, it's because of the FAFSA delay, everybody's pushing their dates out a little bit further. But for all the seniors, again, do it as soon as the FAFSA comes out in December. Get that application in, so that way you could still qualify if you're eligible for this Florida Student Assistance Grant. It goes up to $3,260 per year. Every school is a little bit different in how much they award, but just get that application in so that way you can qualify. The next group is for the federal aid. When you file a FAFSA, it's going to tell you if you qualify for a federal Pell Grant, and it'll give you an estimate of the amount. If you don't qualify, it just will leave that out. It won't tell you about a federal Pell Grant. But it goes up to $7,395 for this year. It might go up a little bit next year. We haven't heard yet. But again, that'll be on the FAFSA if you qualify. The next federal grant is a Supplemental Educational Opportunity Grant. And other than being a mouthful, that's another one of those limited funded grants that's available. So again, you want to meet the priority deadline for the school. If you qualify for a federal Pell Grant, there's a likelihood that you would qualify for this grant as well. It goes up to $4,000, but again, schools are a little bit different in how they award it because they're trying to work with more students. So it might be $1,000 or $2,000, just depending on the school. The third bullet point on here is the institution. Again, the largest source of financial aid. The college that you're applying to is going to award the most amount of financial aid that's out there. The grants can range anywhere from a couple $100. It could go all the way up to full tuition, housing, and meals, again, depending on the school, depending on what sort of resources they have available. What you want to do is, again, watch for that priority deadline, find out if they have one, find out what forms they require. They're all going to require the FAFSA, so you're going to need to do the FAFSA, but there might be an additional form that you need to do. It might be their own institutional financial aid form. It might be something called the CSS profile, which we're going to talk about in a minute, or something else. So just find out from the school. They'll list what applications they need. The vast majority of schools just require the FAFSA, but just check to make sure that you've got everything that you need. And then the last one that I have on the screen here isn't really a grant, but it's the best place to fit it. It's the Florida prepaid plan. So if you've bought a Florida prepaid plan, you can use that obviously at a public school based on the percentage that you bought the plan at. You can also use it at private colleges and universities in the state of Florida. It'll typically pay out around $126 a credit hour, which works out to be about $3,500 a year. Again, it's all dependent upon the plan that you took and that you signed up 4 years ago. The little known fact is you can actually take that out of state. So if you decide to go to a school out of state, you can actually use your Florida prepaid plan out of state. It pays just like at a private school, about $3,500 per year. So if you do want to use that, you can, but don't. Stay in state. There's lots of great schools right here, whether it's public or private, so use all that here. The other question that I get on Florida prepaid a lot is, how do I use that if I get Bright Futures? If I'm getting the 100%, the Academic Scholars Bright Futures Award, and I'm going to UCF, for example, it's going to cover my tuition. So what do I do at Florida prepaid? If your student lives on campus, you can actually use the Florida prepaid plan to help offset some of those housing costs. You can use both of them, even if tuition is covered by Bright Futures. The other option is to save your Florida prepaid, use it for graduate school, or you can transfer it down to another sibling if you want. But you can use both of those if you have the need to use those. You always want to use Bright Futures first, because that's only for undergraduate study, whereas Florida prepaid you can use for graduate. You can transfer it and do some other things with it. And that's why you'd use Bright Futures first. The other really cool thing about everything I've talked about so far is everything is what I'd call is stackable, meaning you can add everything on top of each other. So if you go all the way back to the very first thing I talked about was Bright Futures, your student can get the Bright Futures scholarship, they can get the Benequisto scholarship, they can get a merit-based scholarship from the school, they can get an athletic scholarship from the school, they could get a music, theater, or art scholarship from the school, they can get a private scholarship, they can get any of these grants that are on the screen, and all of it can add together to help bring down your cost and maybe even cover your cost. It all depends on your students and what type of academic profile they have, what type of income and assets your family has on the need-based side. So there's lots of aid that's available to help bring down that cost in terms of grants and scholarships. All right, so the next group is going to be those self-help dollars that I was referring to earlier. So we'll start with loans. And the first thing I always say about loans is nobody wants you to borrow. If you don't have to borrow, don't borrow. There's over 6,000 colleges and universities nationwide. There's amazing schools right here in Florida and great state of Florida financial aid through Bright Futures and other ways to help bring down that cost. So if it's not a good financial fit, look for another school. There's lots of fantastic schools that your student can apply to and hopefully make it a good financial fit for your family. If you do have to borrow, then there are some federal loans that are good investments, because if that's what you need to go to school to get that degree, it is an investment in your future. But the key is to only borrow what you need. Don't borrow for a great spring break trip, or don't borrow for that amazing housing on campus, the best housing that's available. Borrow what you need to get your educational degree, because that'll limit what you have to borrow in your debt. If you stick with the federal programs, so the federal direct programs that are out there, a student can't graduate with more than $31,000 of debt anyway. So that's what I always encourage students. If you have to borrow, stick with just the federal direct loan program for students. There's two different types. One's called subsidized, one's unsubsidized. The school will let you know which one you qualify for. The only difference between the two is who pays the interest while the student's in school for those 4 years. If you have financial need, Then you receive subsidized. The feds will pay the interest on it while you're in school. If you don't have need, if all your needs are already met, then you receive the unsubsidized, and the interest would start from day one. Again, it's only 4 years, so it's not a huge amount of interest that accumulates. But the maximums that I recommend for families is stick with the subsidized loan maximum. If you're a first-year student, the maximum you can get is $3,500 per year. The second year, it's $4,500. As a third year, it's $5,500. And as a fourth year, it's $5,500 as well. If that's all you borrow, because that's what you needed to get through your education, if you add all those up, that's about $19,000 of debt that you would graduate with. That's a good investment. There's a lot of income contingent or ways to pay those loans back. The feds offer lots of repayment options. And if that's what it took for you to get your diploma, get your degree, that's well worth it. Again, if you don't have to borrow, don't borrow a dime. But if you do, try to stick within those lower maximums to help you out. There is a parent loan that's available. There's also private loans that are available that are credit-based. If you need those loans, you can absolutely go for those. My caveat here is if you have to borrow $20,000 in your first year, multiply that times 4 because you're going to need it every year. And costs go up for most schools, so you're probably going to wind up borrowing a little more. So that's going to add up very quickly. In the news, when you hear about folks borrowing $100,000 or they're $200,000 in debt because they had a parent loan or a private loan, and that's what put them with that debt burden. So again, I highly discourage you from going that route. If you absolutely need to, they're there, but try to stick with the federal direct loan program if you have to borrow at all. Now, the last self-help program is what we refer to as work study. It's a way students can work on campus. It allows students to get a paycheck, just like any other job. Every 2 weeks, they'll get a paycheck for the hours they've worked. Most students use that for books or other expenses they have on campus. They might also get a reduced room rate, or maybe a free room, or maybe reduced meal plan or free meals. So it might come in the form of that non-monetary compensation versus an actual paycheck. There's 2 programs that are need-based. It's the federal work study program and the state work program. The school will let you know whether you qualify or not. There's also, every school has an institutional work program where your student can work on campus regardless of the financial need. The one you'll see the most are those campus tour guides. So when you go visit campuses, the tour guides will take you around campus. Typically, they're paid through the campus work program. It's not a need-based program. So there's lots of ways your students can work on campus. There's a ton of reasons why your students should work if you can fit that into their schedule. National studies show that students that work on campus actually have a higher GPA when they graduate. They retain at a higher rate, and they graduate at a higher rate because they're getting acclimated to campus much faster. They also, when they graduate, have ready-made references. So I'll use the example in my office. Every college that I've worked at, I've always hired work study students. When they graduate, they put me down as a reference. So employers can call me, I can tell them about the student. And that carries a lot of weight from the school that they graduated from, that I can tell them how that student worked, what their punctuality was, could I rely on the student? And that's different from other students that maybe didn't have that experience. The other benefit for you as a family is you have someone else checking in on your kids every day. So there's lots of support systems at every school that they have to help students succeed. But when a student works on campus, now you've got a supervisor that's also checking in. So again, at every campus that I've been at, every school that's worked that I've worked for, they have work study students there, and they check in. How are you doing? How are classes going? Any tests coming up? And if a student has a test or they need the day off for whatever reason, they get it off. They don't have to have coverage. They don't have to request it months in advance. They're a student first. They get to do what they need to do study-wise. So it's a way that you've got someone making sure they're being successful. And if they're having trouble or they need to connect with someone, it's a warm handoff across campus and helping them connect. I always get the question or the statement every year. Families will say, well, I don't want my student to work right away. I want them to get acclimated to campus, and then I'll let them find a job later on, or maybe second semester. I said, don't do that, because if you wait that long, there's nothing that's available, or only the jobs that students didn't want are available. It may not be the best jobs. So start looking in July or August, find a job that fits your schedule and fits what you want to do, and then interview or whatever you need to get that job. And then if it doesn't work out, you can quit. There's no harm, no foul. but most of the time you'll find that it fits in your schedule. It's a great way to keep you busy during those off hours in between class and helps keep you on track to be a better student. So I highly encourage you to do that. All right, so let's talk about the forms and the things that you're going to have to complete to receive some of these types of aid. So FAFSA is the main financial aid form, and that stands for the Free Application for Federal Student Aid. And that's the form that everybody's going to require. So make sure you do that when it comes out. It's a standardized form. It has demographic information about the family, but also the income information, the financial information about the family. It's going to calculate what's called a Student Aid Index, or SAI. And that's what the college will use to determine if you qualify for need-based financial aid and how much. The FAFSA opens in December. Normally it opens on October 1st. Next year, when you're applying for the FAFSA, it will be open on October 1st. I shouldn't say guarantee, but I'm pretty sure it's going to be open in October. This year it's just delayed because they're making some major changes to it this year. So just be on the lookout for it. I'm sure you're going to hear from the counselors, you're going to hear from the colleges, it'll be in the news because it will be big news once it's out. So do it as soon as you can, get that financial aid application in. That way the schools will know they can award you financial aid. When the student does it, they're going to identify what they're calling contributors. It's a new term, and that's essentially the parents. So when the student starts the FAFSA, they're going to list you as a parent, your email address, you're going to get a link, and you're going to log in directly into their FAFSA and provide your information to complete the FAFSA after the student's done their section on it. What you're going to need to get started is a username and password. They call it the FSA user ID, I believe is what they're technically referring to it. You can actually go out now and get those, and I highly encourage you to do that now. So the student needs one and the parent needs one. I want you to do it now. Don't wait till December, because once December hits, if you haven't done it yet, the FAFSA comes out, you're still going to have to do it at that time. And if there's any glitches in it, they're going to be inundated with questions, and you may not be able to get through to FAFSA to help get this situated. So do it now. That way there's help available with FAFSA. They can help get you set up. If there's any glitches in the system, there's plenty of time to get that done. So just go to the FAFSA website. There's a place where you'll do all the sign up for the username and password. To get those, you do need to put the Social Security number for the student. And I highly encourage you to either get their Social Security card out or your tax return out that has their Social Security number on, because that went through the IRS system, so you know it's right. And just triple check it to make sure you didn't transpose a number or you didn't use a sibling's Social Security number. You can sort of fix it if you got it wrong, but it really is a showstopper that you almost have to start back over. And a lot of times, if you put the wrong one in, you don't find out till months later. So again, just triple check it up front to make sure it's right. That way it's right going in, and everybody gets the right information. And then have an idea of what colleges your student's interested in applying to. If they haven't applied to the school yet, but they're thinking about it, go ahead and list them. It used to be on the FAFSA, you could only list 10 schools. They've increased that to 20 now, which just blows my mind. And students are applying to 20 different schools, but I know they are. So if your student's thinking about applying to one, go ahead and list it. Even if they haven't applied yet, list it on the FAFSA. They still do need to do the admission application, but that's separate. Get the FAFSA done, list the school on there. That way, once they've done the admission stuff, the college will already have your financial aid information. They can do the financial aid offer letter to you. If you didn't list a school, and maybe a month from now or 2 months from now, I guess it's later now because December's still 2 months away. I keep thinking the FAFSA's open. Let's say it's February and your student comes across this amazing school that they love and they want to apply to. You didn't list them on the FAFSA. You can always go back in and add them at that time. That's fine. It just will take about a week for them to get the information. So that's why, again, if you have the inkling of it now, go ahead and list them. If you list 20 schools on there and they've only applied to 3 of them, that's fine. The other schools aren't going to do anything with your information until you actually apply. All right. So on the left-hand side of this slide are the things that the FAFSA is going to look at. It's going to what we call assess. That's going to go into the formula to calculate that student aid index. On the asset side, it's going to look at the cash savings and checking accounts that you have. The way I explain this to folks is it's really what rolls over from month to month. The FAFSA will say, what's the value as of today if you're filling out the FAFSA today? If you were just paid today and you're paying your rent or your mortgage tomorrow, don't put what the value is today. That's not truly what's in your savings account or your checking account. Put what rolls over from month to month. You have investments that are outside of qualified retirement accounts, like if you own stocks or you have mutual funds, you do have to put the value on that day. So hope it's a down day in the market that you can put. And so it's a lower amount of assets, but you do have to list what it was on that day that you completed the FAFSA. And then on the income side, it's going to link directly with the IRS. So it's going to pull in the tax returns that you provided, but they might ask you some separate questions if you have business income or rental income, or maybe some untaxed income that's out there, but it'll ask you those questions if it needs it. The things that are excluded are on the right-hand side of the slide. On the asset side, again, qualified retirement accounts like 401k, IRAs, 403bs, those are all excluded. If you have stocks or a mutual fund and you say, this is really my retirement account, it still counts. If it's not in a 401k or if it's not in an IRA, it has to be counted. But if it's in a qualified account, it is excluded from those calculations. Your primary residence is excluded, so the value of that is excluded. If you have a second home, the net worth is counted. On the income side, if you have VA benefits or financial aid or loans, those are all excluded on the FAFSA. So my only caveat to this is they're excluded from the FAFSA, but the college might ask you questions about those areas. So there are things that they might need, whether it's their own institutional form, or if they have what's called the CSS profile, it might ask those questions as well. But the FAFSA will not ask those questions on the right-hand side. All right, so I mentioned that there's a direct link to the IRS. When you do the FAFSA, it is going to automatically transfer all that information. So it does make it faster. It reduces the amount of questions that are on there, and the information is going to be correct. So you don't have to provide as much information to the schools. So that is a really nice improvement on the new FAFSA that's coming out here in December. I alluded to the CSS profile. So again, this is something that some colleges require. About 400 colleges throughout the US require it. In the state of Florida, I believe Miami's the only one. I think Stetson requires it for international students, but I believe that's it. But you can check for sure. Just do a Google search, type in CSS profile, list of colleges. It'll give you the whole list of schools that are out there. If your college requires it, go ahead and fill it out. It actually is available now. It did open on October 1st, so this one you can complete now, and then just do the FAFSA when it comes out in December. The colleges are just trying to get at some additional information so they can maximize the amount of institutional financial aid they award to students. So if they require it, make sure you do it, or if they have their own institutional form, make sure you do that. All right, so let's go back to the FAFSA formula and talk through sort of at a high level how that's calculated. We have on the left-hand side of this or on this kind of graphic, you got the parent income and parent assets. So the parent income, it takes the income that's coming from the tax return, subtracts out from that, the taxes are paid, there's an allowance for folks to live on and some other allowances, the percentages that come out of it, and it comes up with a contribution from income. Then it takes the parent's assets and has what's called an asset protection allowance, subtracts out that, and a percentage, a smaller percent then is used for the parent assets, adds those two together and comes up with what's called the parent contribution from income and assets. On the right-hand side, it does something similar, but it's a little bit simpler. On the student income side, if your students earned less than $6,100 in that calendar year, then the student income contribution is zero. If they earn more than that, then it's just a percentage of income that it's going to take. And then student assets, it's a flat percentage of whatever their assets are from their cash savings or checking account. Add those two together to come up with the student contribution. Add those two together, student and parent, to come up with that student aid index. And that's going to remain the same regardless of what college or university your student applies to, because it's your household financial situation. You apply to 100 different schools, the SAI will be exactly the same regardless of which one you apply to. It is a federal formula. It's out there if you want to look through all the nitty-gritty and how to do it and do a manual calculation. You can absolutely do it. Just do a Google search on student aid index formula. You can pull it up and walk through and figure that out as well. Next side of the equation, that's the first part of the equation. The next side of the equation is the college cost. So what does it cost to go to that school? We break the cost into two different components. We have direct costs, which are tuition, housing, and meals. So those are things the college is going to bill you for. We have indirect costs. These are things that we estimate that we know students are going to spend in some way, shape, or form, but it's all individual. It's up to that family circumstance. They're going to buy books, but it depends on which program they're in. If they're in a nursing program, it might be a higher cost book than maybe in a business program or an English program. But some semesters it might be more or less, depending on the program. There's transportation costs, there's personal expenses, and just other expenses that students are going to spend. I call them the pizza and haircut money fund. It's things that kids are going to spend. They probably spend them now in school, and that's what we estimate as well. Again, we're not going to bill you for them, but you're going to likely spend those in some way, shape, or form, and the school is going to give you that estimate. So each college is going to calculate all that, add it up, and come up with what's called the cost of attendance. Every college is going to have a different cost of attendance. If you looked at all 6,000 colleges, there's not going to be two that are the same. If you looked at all the public colleges and universities in the state of Florida, no two are going to be the same. Their tuitions might be similar, they might have similar indirect, but they're not going to be the same. They're all going to be different. So when you apply this simple formula that we look at is we take the cost of attendance that's going to be different for every school, and that's that total direct cost plus the indirect cost. Subtract from that the family student aid index, which is going to be the exact same regardless of what school your student applies to come up with that financial need for your family. So that's kind of at a high level what that looks like. And as a very simplistic example, if we looked at a private university, the cost of attendance might be $75,000. At a public, it might be $25,000. Again, that's tuition, housing and meals, books, estimate for transportation, and estimate for personal miscellaneous. It's going to be different on both sides. The SAI is the same. The student aid index is exactly the same. So this family might have a $10,000 student aid index. At the private university, the need $65,000. At the public university, it's $15,000. The goal of financial aid is to bridge that gap, meet as much of that financial need as possible to help reduce that cost, so that way costs come out of the equation. So then the family can decide what's the best academic fit, social fit, and overall fit for your family, not just what the best financial fit is. So again, that gets back to the goal of financial aid. It can't always be done. Schools can't always meet 100% of that financial need, but that's what they're trying to do. Now we'll talk a little bit about appeals. So I mentioned about income that the FAFSA requires. So your kids are starting fall of 2024. The FAFSA income or FAFSA information is going to ask for 2-year-old data. It's going to ask for your 2022 tax return income information. If your 2023 income is less than your 2022, or even next year, if your 2024 income is less than your 2022 income, contact the college. Let them know, see if there's anything they can do to help offset that change of income. The FAFSA is trying to predict your future income based on what you've listed as that 2022 income. If it's less, talk with the school, see if there's anything else they can do. If it's more, don't tell us. Everything's good. But if it's less, definitely work with the school. There's going to be some documentation they're going to require, but they'll try and work with you on that. Every school is going to handle a little bit differently, but talk with the college. The financial aid office at that college your student's interested in is going to be your best friend. They want to help you. They really do want to help you get aid to go to that school. So reach out to them. I know all my colleagues here in Florida, they're phenomenal. All the schools really do want to work with you. So reach out to them and ask for help. One thing that is going to be different, if any of you have students that have gone to college before, on the FAFSA, it used to ask, or it still will ask for how many students are in college. It used to take that into account. If you have more than 2 in college, God bless you. It's expensive to send 2, 3, 4. We've seen 5 kids at the same time going to school. That's a lot for those families to afford. On the new FAFSA, it doesn't take it into account. So that's one of the negatives with the new FAFSA that's coming out. If you're in that situation where you have 2 or more in college, reach out to the financial aid office to see if there's any suggestions or anything else they can do. Some colleges are trying to find ways to help those families out. Not all colleges can, so they may not be able to, but reach out and see. There are some schools that are going to do something. I don't know that it's going to be the majority of schools, but it never hurts to ask. Again, we want you to get as much aid as possible. And if that school has the opportunity to award more aid because you have more in school, reach out and see if they can. All right, one of my last slides here is on this net price calculator. So we're in an awkward situation where the FAFSA is delayed. You're trying to make decisions on schools, where to apply, what to do, maybe what to visit. The net price calculator can help with that. So normally I tell students, if you're a senior, don't do the net price calculator, just do the FAFSA. But because the FAFSA is delayed, the net price calculator can help you get an idea of what type of financial aid and how much you're going to receive. The only caveat is you need to look at the details on their net price calculator to make sure it takes into account the changes that are taking place with the new FAFSA and what year they're using in terms of cost. So you want to make sure it's still applicable to you. Every college has to have one. So you can Google it, type in net price calculator, the name of the college. It'll take you right to their page. You can fill it out. It'll kick out an estimate so you have some idea of what that school is interested in. If you're thinking about applying early decision to a certain school, make sure you do their net price calculator. You want to make sure to have an idea of what type of financial aid you're going to receive before you commit to that school. If you're going regular decision, which most students do, you can wait till the FAFSA comes out. Or again, if you're trying to decide whether you should apply or visit that school, you can do the net price calculator to give you an idea of what type of aid to receive. If there's any juniors or younger, use a net price calculator. It's a great way to get that estimate. It also helps give you a floor to say, I can't afford that school, so now I need to either really ace my SAT or ACT, or I really need to up my game for merit scholarships, or it's just out of the ballpark, so I can't afford it, and I need to look elsewhere for schools. So it helps kind of level that floor for you and set your expectations. All right, so this slide here is just my timeline that helps students kind of where they should be in their cycle. Again, this is for seniors. For right now, you should be doing all of your admission material. Get those admission applications in, get any essays or any other forms that they need, get those in as soon as possible. December, as soon as it comes out, get the FAFSA done. Next year, when it comes out in October, my recommendation is to always do it before Halloween. It'll come out typically October 1st. Don't do it on October 1st because it crashes every year because they first open it and everybody's trying to do it, and invariably it happens. But if you do it by Halloween, you've met every school's priority filing date, so there's no problem with that. Again, this year you just have to do it as soon as it comes out, get it done just as quickly as you can once it comes out. So it's a little bit different this year. The requirement is that it has to be out by December 31st. I know the feds are trying to get it out as soon as they can. They're behind on it, is my understanding. So they have not given us a date on when it'll be out. If I were a betting man, which I am not, but if I were, my money would be on December 31st at 11:59 because it's just, there's a lot they're doing to try and get this out. So just stay tuned. If you hear that it's open, go ahead and go out and get it. But right now, get your username and password so you're all ready to go when that FAFSA comes out. My other thing that I'll say on the FAFSA, if you need help completing it, your financial aid office at the school you're interested in can help you out. There's FAFSA sessions that will likely be out there that can help you. If you absolutely need help and you can't find other resources, feel free to reach out to me. Contact your counselors. They've got my email address. You can reach out to me. I'm happy to help you out. Just tell me you came to one of my high school nights. I'm happy to help you out. I want you to get the aid. Again, wherever you go. I have colleagues throughout the state that are doing the same thing. They're helping folks do the FAFSA for students that are going elsewhere. Again, we're here to help our students wherever they're going. Once the FAFSA's out, you've done it, the school will start to receive that. So stay tuned for any notifications from the financial aid office if they need additional information. We have what's called verification, where we might have to verify some items. So just watch and respond to any of those questions that come from the financial aid office. Your financial aid offer should come very quickly after your admission, so stay tuned for that. March and April, you'll be replying to those offers if they require you to accept something, so you get that done. There is a state of Florida aid financial aid application that you need to do for Bright Futures. So it's a simple form, it's a 5-minute form. And I forget, I should know this, Whitney, but you guys do that with them, or is that something separate? You guys do that? Okay. So your counselor's there. It's awesome that your counselors help your students do that. So you don't even need to worry about that section. So that's great. May 1st is the admission deadline. So you have to send in your enrollment deposit, let the admission office know where you're going. My only caveat to that is make sure you know what your financial aid offer is, how much you're going to pay for school. If you don't know by early April, reach out to the financial aid offices and see if there's something that they're missing or something else, and find out why you haven't received your financial aid offer. If you can't get it before May 1st, see if you can get an extension, because you really should know what the cost is before you send in your enrollment deposit at that school. And then hopefully you receive some outside scholarships, and you let the financial aid office know about them so they can incorporate it in your financial aid. and that way you don't have to pay those up front. So my very last slide is just some resources. The studentaid.gov is where you file the FAFSA. If you go there, there'll be links on there to do your username and password as well for the FAFSA. FastWeb and scholarships.com is the outside scholarship search databases. Again, great resources. There's plenty of them out there. I don't get paid by them. They don't pay anybody. They don't charge anything. FastWeb was started by a financial aid guy, so we like those guys. So we try to promote them, but they're great resources. We know students who receive scholarships to these sites, so that's why we promote them. FloridaStudentFinancialAid.org is the state of Florida's website, so it has all the information on Bright Futures, on the Benequisto Scholarship, and all the other state of Florida information. So it's a great resource for those state programs. And again, the financial aid office at the college you're applying to is going to be your best resource. So reach out to them. If you have questions or you're just not sure where to go, they will help you out. And again, I know my colleagues across the state, they want to help you. So reach out to them, let them provide the information that you need.